and awkward.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. Hey guys, welcome to Youth Group Live. We have an empty cup.
Classic.
It has our logo. We were like trying to look legit, and it's just
We're all gonna pass it back and forth.
fill it with hand sanitizer and dip. Anyway, dip your hand. Maybe not. I think we're within the coronavirus like span. You're not supposed to sit next to each other in right now.
We're also got more than 10 people.
No.
Total.
No? Oh, total in that room. Yeah.
Not in this room, though.
Not in this room.
Freaking close.
So tonight we are doing Youth Group Live, and it's going to look a little different because you're not here and we miss you. And it's awkward because we've never done Youth Group to a camera before, so that's kind of weird. But we're also really excited that we still get to hang out with you guys and be at church. And so tonight we are doing rescue stories, and we're hoping that you guys start thinking about your rescue stories. So what are things that Jesus saved you from, and what does your stories look like? And so these guys are going to be sharing their stories tonight, and I'm going to kind of help guide the conversation, although I don't think they need really that much guidance. So we're super pumped about tonight. And make sure that you are sharing your stories during this time on social media and texting people, and you're doing your best to like disciple people that you're around. One thing that's cool that you could do is a lot of us are on YouVersion, the YouVersion Bible app. So if you ever want to do a Bible plan with us, you should totally do that. So tonight, Drew's going to start us off, and he's going to talk about his story. So we're super excited. I think most people who come to youth group know you, but the internet doesn't.
Sure.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes.
And I'm going to open my polar seltzer.
Perfect.
You're super not
Shit,
smart.
I should have brought one. My name is Drew. I've been at this church on and off. I grew up here in the Dalles. Oh, yes. I need the mic. The very wobbly mic.
Yeah.
I grew up here in the Dalles. I'm 25. I know I look 30, but it's not true. I had a kid tell me I looked like I was 30 today. So I grew up in this church. I was saved in this church in a thing called Royal Rangers. I know some of you are familiar with that, even the girls these days. So I was saved at 6 years old. Is when I decided to follow Jesus, and it hasn't been perfect all the way through, but it's been a long time.
Yeah. So one thing that we want to talk about is, so some people think that their testimony is just when they came to know the Lord, but it can also be just stuff God did in your life.
Yeah.
So what part of your story do you want to talk about specifically? Do you want to talk about like your finding Jesus story, or something God did in your life, or what kind of thing?
Well, I mean, I think my story is kind of a weird mix of the two, where because I made that decision so young, and because I was lucky enough to have a mom that brought me to church on a regular basis, the things that God saved me from, I definitely have seen Him do that throughout my life, but there's so much that potentially could have gone wrong that I don't even know about. And so I was lucky to be saved from things that maybe I would have gotten into if God hadn't intervened in my life so early.
That's awesome. So, like looking back at your life, could you tell that God was working at the time, or looking back now, you see things that you didn't then, or how would you describe your experience,
Oh man,
your perspective?
I think looking back is always a lot easier for us. I'd say probably with a whole lot of safety that there must have been a ton of people praying for me to make it through my situation. So my parents divorced when I was about 1 year old. I had a twin sister, and so we did the whole back and forth. There was really no stability for a long time, and for God to have pulled me out of that and like set up some form of stability in my life that I didn't recognize at the time, I was very young, is something I look back on, and it blows my mind even now to look back and say, how in the world did anything make sense back then? So God was definitely working back then, even when I was too small to realize it.
To understand it, yeah. How can you see like the parts of your story coming together in a bigger puzzle? Like, can you look back and see how God has like used specific areas in your story for the whole?
Well, I can't think of a specific thing off the top of my head. I know He's used a lot of different people in my life to encourage me and to push me to follow Jesus more. And there's lots of different things I've done, right? I've been to Bible college for 5 minutes, and I went and lived in a basement in Colorado to do ministry out there with Daniel, because Daniel's an awesome dude, and he invited me out. I told him if my terrible car would make it out there, I'd move out there with him. So following Jesus has been something that maybe I haven't been able to put all the pieces together yet, but I've seen him work in stages. So maybe in a smaller sense, I can see that. Maybe I just need more time and a bigger lens to see everything coming
together. What thing helped you grow the most? Like, what would you say, like, in your Christian journey, what was like your biggest growth point?
There were a lot of things. One of the things was being in church all the time. When I was 13, I think, is when I started coming to youth group, and it wasn't like 5 minutes after that I kind of did like everything here. I remember it would have been my freshman year of high school. I calculated how much time I spent during the week at different places, and I spent more time in this building doing fine arts practices, worship practices, youth group, all these different things than I did at my house or at school. So things were crazy because we were doing so much stuff, and it was awesome. And I think that really sharpened me. It grew friendships that I've had my whole life now. It's drawn me closer to Jesus because you get to be around people who love Jesus more than you do and who know what to do and know how to pray and know how to seek the Lord. Another thing I'd say is the very brief time I was in Bible college was very helpful to me to just be able to focus an entire year on reading the Bible and pursuing knowledge. Not that it was college in and of itself that is necessary or good, but it was just a time that I had to dedicate all my time to seeking the Lord, and so that was really transformative, I think.
Yeah. How would you say, like, looking back at your life, you could see Jesus as the hero of your story?
Oh man, well, really, he's sort of how I phrased it before. You know, in so much instability and in so many things that could have gone wrong, there really wasn't anyone else there, right? And so even if I didn't see it at the time, even if I didn't understand, you know, I think a lot of people in my life tried their best, but really the only answer for why I'm here and why things are together is the Lord. So in looking back, I can see that he was the hero when I was very young, and he was the hero when I was 10 and in the hospital with scarlet fever twice in the same year, because who would have thought? You know, and so even now, you know, trusting the Lord as provider and as the one who sustains and keeps my life is vital to being able to follow Jesus.
What would you say to someone who's going through something similar? So, like divorce or just instability? Like, what would your advice be?
My advice would be, one is to pray, because the Lord is the one that is the sustainer and the keeper of your life, and He's excited about your life even when circumstances aren't good, even when circumstances are terrible around you, right? Whether it's parents that fail or friendships that fail, family structures, you know, fall apart. God has a plan for each and every one of us, and so understanding that God is worthy of your life, that He's good, that He has a good plan, and that He's personal, and that He comes down and He speaks to each and one of us, and He's not put off by our circumstance. I think understanding that is helpful, but it's hard to live in, right? It's hard to live that out. So I would say practically, once you've prayed and after seeking the Lord, I would find strong people in your life, whether that's leadership, whether that's friendships, who seek after the Lord and who pray and who can encourage you. I think those two things are the only thing that's going to get you through.
Right. Prayer and who you're around is a big
Yeah.
deal. Awesome. Thanks for sharing your story.
No problem.
Yeah. So Colleen's gonna hit us up next, and of course, any of us, if you ever need to talk or if something we say, like, it's like, whoa, I want to know more about that, or I've gone through something similar, we're super willing and want to talk to you about it. Probably in person would be great, but you can always text us or message us or
6 feet apart.
6 feet, yeah, 6 feet apart. All right, I'm gonna pass it over to Colleen. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Colleen. Most of you probably know me from youth group and church, and I've been kind of the same as Drew. I've been in this church for as long as I have memory, and been involved in it, and was saved really young as well. So I'm married. I have 4 kids, fabulous boys.
That's awesome. So what part of your story do you want to talk about today? Like, is it your finding Jesus story or just something he did in your life? What kind of...
So I was thinking about that, and my finding Jesus story is real similar. It was on the floor of my bedroom with my mom when I was 5. I was blessed to grow up in a Bible-believing household where they took me to church, where when the doors were open, they were here. That was the environment I grew up in, and I was truly blessed to grow up that way. And I met my husband when I was really young. That's definitely a rescue story in and of itself. Like we met and we knew it was a God thing, and we went through high school together. We got married young. I don't recommend it necessarily, but it was right for us. And I know that God saved us from a lot of other things that could have happened in those situations. But I think the part of my story I want to talk about today is this. In my early 20s, I didn't really turn away from God, but I definitely wasn't following God with my whole heart. And I struggled with some mental health stuff. And I think the part of my story that I don't like to share is it was all behind closed doors. When I was out in the open, I was still that upbeat person that everybody thought I was. If you didn't know me truly, you wouldn't have known that I struggle with those things. But it was definitely a hard season in my life.
Yeah. So kind of mental health stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a lot of people. That's like a huge thing. So when you were going through it, did you see God's hand in it then, or what would you say the difference was between your perspective going through it and your perspective now looking back on it?
I definitely didn't see God's hand in it then, for sure.
Yeah.
I think I was really angry. I think that kind of in the same way, a lot of our world, Steve and I were married at the time in my early 20s, and we didn't have kids at the time, but a lot of things happened that were outside of our control, that really stable things that we thought were going to be there for us were just gone. And we found ourselves in a situation where the support that we thought we had wasn't there. And all of a sudden, we went from, we're going to go follow our dreams to we don't even know what the next step looks like for us. And that was really difficult for me because I am definitely somebody who goes after what I want. And so to find myself in a place where I was like, I don't even know what I want anymore. And just having that, voice in the back of your head that's constantly telling you you're not good enough, that you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You're not doing, whatever it is, or you're not good enough, or you're not, following God the way that you're supposed to follow God. So you're not following God at all, and you're a bad person. And I had that self-talk that was there, and it was difficult at the time that I didn't have the right tools, and I didn't even really want to admit to anybody that this was going on because I wanted to keep that pride. I wanted to keep that self-image that I'm okay and I don't need anybody's help. So I definitely didn't seek the help that I probably should have during that time, and I definitely didn't give it to God the way that I should have.
So looking back now, looking at that situation, how did you see God working in that situation in your life?
So through that season, as our life progressed, we had a lot of ups and downs. We ended up adopting my oldest son, at the end of that season, and then we went into another season of loss for our babies, and it was just this constant season of up and down. And it was during those trials, those storms, those things in our lives that we couldn't control, that we learned, and I say we because my husband was he's part of my story, but we learned that we had to call on God. And, now we know that when those voices are talking to us, or when we're hearing that, when we have that self-talk that's not good, we can take captive those words, and
really
those are not the words to listen to. We can go to the Word. We can hear the Word of God that tells us we are children of God, that we are, His handiwork, that we are who He created us to be, regardless of what outside sources are telling us, or even ourselves are telling us.
Could you expand a little bit? So if there's someone who is struggling with like negative thoughts, like when you talk about taking it captive,
Yeah.
what does that mean to you spiritually, and what does that mean practically? Like, what did you?
Yeah, so it's something that even now, I'm 34 years old, and I still have seasons where I struggle with that. But what I mean by taking it captive is that, when I start to to doubt myself, or when I start to hear those, the things that I'm not good enough, that I'm not whatever, I can just say, that's the devil talking to me. That's not God. That's not right. That's not who it is. And I don't have to allow that to come in and be part of my thought processes. So, when it pops into my mind, it's immediately taking it and saying, I'm not going to deal with that. I'm not going to dwell on that, instead of allowing that to come in and take over my thought process. So pushing that out, and then filling my mind with the Word of God, filling my mind with prayer, filling my mind with the things that God wants me to dwell on, so that I can keep captive those other thoughts and not let them be part of who I am.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mental health stuff, how have you seen like God, He certainly rescued you from it,
Yeah.
and is rescuing you from it.
It's an ongoing thing, for sure.
How have you seen him use it? Like, because I imagine that you've had opportunities to talk to other people who have the same
Yeah,
struggle.
definitely part of the mental health. Even when I was in my young 20s, was self-harm and that kind of thing. I've had the opportunity to talk with other, particularly young girls that go through the same thing, but young men also that go through the same kind of thing, and be able to share my story and share that there is hope, and that when we allow ourselves to just dwell in this place where we don't feel like there is hope, I can show them the hope of Jesus Christ. And that's part of my story now, and I don't have to hide behind anything. It is who I am, and it's something that God rescued me from, and is continuing to rescue me from.
So, like, what are some of the things that helped you the most going through that? What helped you endure? You talked about some of your disciplines of taking it captive, but what other things helped you?
Yeah, definitely finding good counsel.
Yeah.
That can't stress that enough. Like, you're not alone. You're not the only person that has ever struggled with anything. And if you just reach out to somebody, if they're not the person to help you, we can point you in the right direction to find somebody that maybe you can connect with that has struggled in the same way. Just finding good counsel, people that have walked the walk but know that Christ is the answer and can point you in that direction. But also, just the same as Drew said, prayer and reading your Bible. I know reading my Bible helps immensely, because when I struggle with those thoughts and that depression and feeling like I didn't want to do anything, I could pick up my Bible and just read the Word of God, and it begins to just dwell inside of you. And, it starts to being that the storm is outside and what's inside is peace and hope. And as long as we can, continue to hold on to that and look at God as the peace in the storm, He's going to protect us from it. So,
yeah. What did you learn about who Jesus is, and maybe even who you are through that?
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely learning that there's grace, because I knew that, in some of the things that I was doing weren't right. And I knew that some of the things that had led me to this place where I felt like I wasn't a good person were my own choices and my own decisions to not follow God in the way that I knew He wanted me to. So being able to come to that realization that God had grace for me, and His grace was enough. And I could choose today to do the best job moving forward that I can with his strength, with his help. And that it's not about my failures that happened yesterday. It's about the wins I'm going to have today and moving forward.
That's awesome. I mean, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but what would you say to someone that's going through the same thing?
Yeah, definitely just reach out to somebody. Don't feel like you have to do everything on your own. And that's hard because pride tells us that we can do everything ourselves and we don't need help. But sometimes we do. And I think it's really important to reach out and find somebody who you trust and who can help you just see Jesus in every situation.
That's awesome. All right. Thank you for sharing your story. Rich, are you ready?
Sure.
Do you think you can unmask for this?
No.
No. Okay. So, Rich is having all the precaution and hand sanitizer. Do you want to introduce yourself and maybe tell a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into your story?
Sure. Hi, I'm Rich. I'm not a germaphobe, but I'm not going to die from this. So,
We might. Oh my gosh.
oh gosh. So a little about my story. I mean, I could pick out like one piece of it. I think that's kind of what we want to do.
Yeah.
So one thing I don't think very many people know is back in the day, I went to Germany on a missions trip, and I was there for 11 days. We went to a place called Erfurt, which is in a part of the country. So
Yeah.
that was a pretty cool experience.
Just Google it.
Yeah, basically. So yeah.
So you want to talk about your experience in Germany?
Sure.
Yeah,
So
that'd be great.
Yeah, so it was a pretty crazy experience, all things considered. So the missions trip that I'd gone on just before that was to Mexico, and I think the majority of the people at this table went on that, which is kind of a weird statement.
Yeah.
Uh,
You guys did it. We were there.
right.
You were there with your dad. Air high five, don't touch.
Yep. Yep. There you go.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a really transformative experience when we were in Mexico. We saw a lot of crazy results. We had a lot of really cool experiences. And when I went to Germany, it's kind of hard not to anticipate that you're going to get the same thing. But what we found was substantially different. The culture was a lot different. The people were a lot different. The church place that we were at was a lot different. And it was interesting because it was like in the way that so the church that we were at was in Erfurt, which means that it's like a built-up place. There's lots of people. There's good infrastructure. Everything's very clean, very neat, very put together. But what we found is, and this is not like a statement for the German people as in totality, but we definitely did not see the same level of openness that we did when we were in Mexico, or at least when I was in Mexico. And that was a really interesting experience. It kind of, I don't know, you get a little like shook, I guess. I can use that word. And we were there for, like, the whole trip was 11 days, and we were doing a kids program. And so we were kind of hoping to, like, reach out to kids and stuff, and so we had a whole bunch of really cool ways that we were planning on doing that. And that involved, going out to do, like, street performance and just a bunch of really cool stuff to get kids excited. And it seemed like we were having some success. Definitely it was a lot harder than what I was hoping it would be. And for the 11 days that this whole trip was, we had like a nightly event for 5 of those 11 days. Like there was travel days, there was down days, there was travel days, there was various different stuff. I think I said travel twice, but you get me. In and out of the country, flying, and then also moving around the country. But for those 5 days, we did canvassing for a couple days beforehand, really super pumping it up, getting stuff out in the local media and stuff like that. And the first night came, and we had nobody show up. And when you're like expecting to see God move and then getting no one to show up, that can be devastating. And that can kill your spirit and your enthusiasm. And so after the first night, we had to go out the next day to do more canvassing. And the next night came and nobody showed up. And we had to do it again. And nobody still showed up. And for all 5 days that I was there in that missions trip, we didn't have a single person show up for the entire event. And it's hard to not feel like it's your fault. It's hard not to feel like, well, maybe God's just not in this. Maybe, this was a mistake coming here. Like, maybe God wasn't really calling us to do this. Like, all sorts of doubts and things can come into your mind, and it can blind you to what's really going on. And one of the things that we talked about is how, like you were mentioning, like how our perspective has changed looking back. And for a while, like legitimately, it's one of those things where it's like you try to sugarcoat it a little bit when you be like, oh, we just wanted to be a good positive influence, but you're always fighting that desire to be the last link in the chain of someone's journey towards discovering a real relationship with Christ. You always want to be the person that scores the touchdown, if you will. And you never really want to take that kind of, not a back seat, but you never want to be one of those links in the chain that leads someone there. So that was one of the takeaways, looking back, to be like, hey, just because we didn't get to score that touchdown, we were an important part to the people that we were able to witness to on the street in the time that we were there. But the biggest takeaway for me looking back on it was, and again, you don't really notice this at the time, but looking back, I can see the difference that occurred in the pastors that were there. And specifically, they had one volunteer. And I'm not going to name them by name, obviously. Not that they'll watch our live stream, but I don't remember their name. So I'll go with the first one. So to keep them anonymous or whatever. Looking back now, even though it was years ago, I can consciously realize and put all those pieces together that when they first showed up, it was someone that hadn't been in church for a very long time, but they were excited. So when the pastors reached out to them, be like, hey, we need help getting this event set up. And looking back now, I realized that night to night, this volunteer was becoming more and more engaged, and they were asking more and more questions. And looking back, it's kind of funny to be like, whenever you hear that expression where it's like, one life is worth it. One person is worth it. For me, it's frustrating that I'm like, I missed who that one person was. I was expecting it to be someone off the street. I wasn't expecting it to be someone who was there to try to help set up the event. Would be the person, that I at least perceive to be the person that got the most out of it. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of lessons that can come out of that in various different aspects. But for me, I think that's one of the biggest takeaways, was the fact that you never want to discount the impact that you're having when you're doing ministry, when you're putting on events, when you're doing performances. You never want to lessen or overlook the impact of the people who might be judges or evaluators, or the people who are next to you in your presentation, or the people that are singing next to you on your worship team. So for me, I thought that was an interesting event to kind of maybe recap for you, and maybe not a lot of people know about.
Yeah, that's awesome. How do you feel like, as that being a part of your story, how do you think that's impacted the rest of your story? Like, what is that? How's that helped you?
Yeah, sure. It opens up your perspective a little bit. When you can start thinking outside of the box of what you think the reality of your actions are going to be, or what your influence is going to be, you're going to realize that there's going to be these outside of the box, these kind of fringe cases or people that you might overlook otherwise, and realize that you're having an impact on a lot of people, way more than you realize. So I think that was kind of one of the lasting things that I took away from it.
Was that like you're a light more than you realize?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Looking back at that, and I know that's like kind of I'm sure at the time it felt negative, but how are you able to look back and see Jesus as like the hero of that story?
Absolutely. So, and again, it's being selfless. Like, obviously, I was a teenager. We've all been teenagers at one point in time, or still are. You never know. Uh, there's people in this room.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it. Great crew. So yeah, when it's hard not to kind of try to put yourself in the center of things. It's just opening up your perspective and kind of shifting what you perceive to be your focus, I guess, and opening that up a little bit. So when I look back at that story, at the time, obviously, it's really easy to think that Jesus wasn't in this at all. Like, that something must not have happened. Like, there should have been a door that was closed that we should have noticed was locked, but we busted our way through it and hoping that someone's going to be there. That's, I think, a really easy trap to fall into, and I think I fell into that trap. But looking back, realizing that God had his hand on it the whole time. And, it's one of those wake-up calls where, again, it's like, I don't know if the next week they had 50 new people. They may have.
Right.
Like, that God works in great and wonderful ways. But really looking back to see that God had his hand on it the whole time. And, there was a purpose why we were there.
That's awesome. What did you learn about Jesus, about who Jesus is through it?
I think looking back, someone that maybe has a sense of humor. Someone who, I grew up in church, so it's easy to have this, like, I guess, an idea, basically told to you by your parents, by your Sunday school teachers, by the pastor, of who Jesus is and what he is and all that stuff. And that's super true and obviously super biblical. But you come to a whole new level of relationship, and you get a greater understanding the closer that you draw to him. So I think, yeah.
Cool. What would you say to someone going through something similar? So maybe they felt like God was leading them a direction and then they're not seeing. What would you say to them?
I think it's really easy to get discouraged when you don't see immediate results.
Yeah.
And that's like in literally everything in life. But it's like a roller coaster. You're not going to get hurt unless you jump off. I guess that's maybe the best way I could summarize that.
Right.
Is that God's got his hand on you. He's got his hand on the situation. And even though, you're going through a dark tunnel, there's, twists and turns. I'm really diving into this roller coaster analogy. I got something. Even though people are screaming around you and, maybe your hands are up in the air.
Someone's vomiting behind you.
Yeah. And there's a weird screeching sound that you're pretty sure might be them trying to apply the brakes and it's not stopping, or whatever. You just can feel completely out of control. But in the end, that God's those rails that's going to keep you there. And even though, God, just like a roller coaster, man, this fits so well. Just like a roller coaster, God doesn't promise that you're going to have a really smooth ride that's going to be without its periods of kind of building you up and dropping you down and all sorts of crazy stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
in the end, a roller coaster.
In the end, roller coaster. And fruit takes time.
It does.
And sometimes you don't see like the end result of things. So yeah, thank you. That's awesome. Sophia, I'm gonna pass this to you.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna stand you up. Do you want to introduce yourself? I just kind of did it for you, but
Hi. I'm Sophia. I'm 21. I'm awkward, and I'm gonna pretend that I'm not for the next few minutes. Yeah, did woo!
Oh my gosh.
Leslie just went cut it off.
Just embrace the awkward. It's okay. Just go for it. So what part of your story are you gonna tell? Like, are you gonna tell your how you came to Jesus story or something in your life? Like, what are you thinking?
Well, I was saved at 18, but last night took some advice from my good friend Leslie, who told me to pray about what you should talk about, and I landed on actually talking about when I got sick when I was 19.
Okay, good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you got sick. Can you give us some background, like explain what happened? I know, but the internet doesn't.
I'm going to start off with a very funny beginning to
Go
this,
for it.
which is kind
Yeah.
of unusual. Yes. So the first symptom I ever showed was a really fast, erratic heartbeat, and then my heart started skipping beats, which was kind of scary. But I was with Michaela when the first time it happened. I got really faint, and Michaela was determined that it was low iron. So she ran to her fridge, she grabbed a fistful of lunch meat, and came back to me, and she was like, eat this. She at one point tried to force feed me the meat. Safe to say
That's a good friend.
Safe to say, though, the meat didn't solve my problems, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michaela. Yeah.
Dude, I have low iron. Just meet me. Just kidding. All right, go ahead. All right.
Anyways, the meat didn't work, and about a week later, I was still having these symptoms, so I went to the doctor, and they noticed it too, and so they hooked me up to this scary-looking machine called an EKG, if you've ever had it. They attach it all over, and it's intimidating looking. And then they didn't see anything wrong with my heart, so they sent me to the hospital, and they ended up doing an ultrasound, and we found out that I had not one, not two, but 3 tumors in my neck. Probably not a good thing to laugh at. But yeah, and it was really scary, and it led to doctor's appointments and needles and bigger machines. There was a machine that looked like it was gonna fall on me and crush me, and it circled around your head, and it was all spooky looking. And then there was talk of cancer and radiation and what was going to happen. And one of the things that could have potentially happened was actually isolation due to radiation treatment.
Oh.
A slightly applicable to what's happening now, maybe just a little bit, but not at all. But anyways, yeah, and I should have been so scared. And honestly, it would have been not an unusual time to kind of lose faith in God. Mm-hmm. But I think somehow in that time it strengthened my faith, because I came out of every doctor's appointment and every bad news being like, this is supposed to happen, this is part of God's plan. Mm-hmm. I have to have faith that this is going to be a part of my life that's important, or I may come to face him sooner than I thought. I just really had to trust him and love him and deal with it all.
Mm-hmm. So they found tumors, and can you explain what happened from then? They found out.
Yeah. So we had a couple of more tests, and thank you, Jesus. I was actually cancer-free, which was really great news. And yeah, and I. Sorry, I'm getting caught up. It's weird to talk on the camera. And yeah, I just kept praying to Jesus, and honestly, at one point I started thanking him, because I knew that he put me exactly where I was meant to be in my life to deal with this. He put me in a group of really important, amazing people, looking at all of you, honestly. And they were praying for me, and they were helping me to laugh through a really hard time, and picking me up at midnight unexpectedly when I got news that I had to take a radiation pill, and that was weird. But yeah, I just, for some reason in this weird time, felt so blessed and lucky.
Mm-hmm. So during it, you kind of had silver lining moments, but looking back now, how has your perspective changed? Has it changed at all, or what do you see now that you didn't see then?
How thankful I am to be alive.
Yeah.
Because I think before you get sick, you take advantage of everything, and you think that life is going to be just an easy breeze, and then you'll die when you're old. 19 years old, I assumed that I was going to live to at least 80 without any health problems. Very unlikely, but it's what I thought. And yeah, it hits you, and then you just, once you're out of it, like I am now, I'm really, truly so thankful for what God did for me, the fact that I knew he was there with me the whole time, and I'm so so happy to live my life, and I'm really happy to live it for him now. I think it really strengthened exactly how I needed to strengthen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you learn about who Jesus is through while you were going through that?
I think I learned a lot more. Hey Michaela. I'm looking at Michaela because she was with me through this whole thing, and we had a bunch of talks about Jesus and having more faith and really leaning into him and searching for him and knowing that he was there. Yeah, and just.
What'd you learn about yourself?
Ooh. I make jokes when bad things happen. That's what I learned about myself. I think it's
Your defense
very-
mechanism.
It is. I was like, strangers were coming up to me, and I was making tumor jokes when they asked what was wrong, because sometimes I'd have Band-Aids on my necks from like a biopsy, or at one point the bumps were so big that they were just like, oh. And yeah, but also I learned I could be happy when bad things were happening, and I also think that was a blessing that, you know, I was really lucky to have. I could be happy when facing the idea of death or cancer or sickness or
What would you say to someone who's going through a sickness, or even talk to someone who is going through sickness, or they have a family member who is? Because I'm sure your parents were. Your mom was pretty freaked out and brother and.
My mom is very similar to me. So a little fun fact: she was making jokes with me. She helped me name my tumors.
Oh, good.
But that's a
Do
little
you want to share
unusual.
the names?
So the biggest one, so they call a tumor of the thyroid a multinodular goiter. So I named my biggest tumor, 3 centimeters, I think, Gal Gadot the goiter.
Nice.
I was very proud of that. But advice I would say is don't be afraid, because God has a plan for you. I actually wrote down this little.
Yeah, go for it.
Psalms 56:3 helped me out a lot, and it said, "When I am afraid, I will put my trust in you." And I'd say, yeah, put your trust in God. Know that even if it seems horrible and scary and you don't want to deal with it, it is part of a plan. As Daniel says, suffering always makes you stronger, makes you a better person. And I think that that's true. I think everything that seems terrible and bad, it's happening potentially for a reason, to help you know how to help somebody else, or help you grow stronger, or give you a wider understanding of what's happening. And I think it's a blessing disguised as something really potentially terrible.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like relatively recently, 2 years.
Yeah.
So, how have you had any opportunities where you've been able to speak to people who are going through something scary or?
Yes. Actually, I got stopped in the line at Mod Pizza like a month ago, maybe, and this woman noticed the scar on my throat. It's my favorite part of myself. And she said, "Hey, did you get a thyroidectomy? Because I'm about to go get that. What's that like? What's like gonna happen?" And yeah, I got to talk about the process of it, and that it was scary, but I think after it happens, there's a relief, and you get a really cool scar out of it. And to other people who maybe aren't going through specifically thyroid issues or tumor issues, just, to look for the good in it, and look for moments of laughter and happiness, and take advantage of those if you're going through a really hard time.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
So we are going to wrap up, and Miss Leslie's gonna she's gonna play a song for us. So we're not doing like a big worshipy time, but we are gonna do one song worship, and I think we're all gonna kind of clear out so that. Hey, bud. Aww.
Say hi, everybody.
Aww. So she's gonna play a song. What song are you doing? It is well.
It is well.
All right, so sing along with us. Let me pray while you get set up. Jesus, thank you for all these stories, God, and all the ways that you rescue us, Lord, and all the ways that you're a hero and that we can look back. And I pray that everybody who's listening, everybody who's just listening along at home, God, that you would begin to show yourself, Lord, in their situation now, Lord, or maybe if there's been situations in the past that they haven't been able to see you in, they haven't understood why it's happened. God, we just pray that, God, you would show yourself, Lord, and the fruit would begin to come, God, and that, Lord, that they would learn more about who you are through it, God. In your name we pray.
By the sound of his voice, and the seas that are shaken and stirred can be calmed and broken for my regard. Through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on you. It is well with me. Far be it from me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see. And this mountain that's in front of me will be thrown into the midst of the sea. Through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on you. It is well. It is well. So let go, my soul, and trust